Hello, it's Webs here again with another Hearthstone deck video. And let's have those who are silenced rise up with an unconventional deck, Silence Priest, utilizing the new card Royal Librarian in order to target the decks in your minions that have a large drawback, such as Razor Leaf or the new card Pack Rider, or even late game with Lady Prestor, as she'll turn your entire deck into big dragons, which are all great silence targets. For mulligans, there are definitely some cards that you always want to keep in your hand, such as Focus Will, as it's the best card to silence your minions with, as you can target your minions quicker with this card. Cards that are great silence targets are other cards that you want to keep in your opening hand, such as Razor Leaf and Package Runner. However, you only want to keep one in your opening hand if you only have one type of silence. If you can't manage to get any type of silence in your opening hand, Stockade's Guard is actually a great alternative, as it will turn your Package Runner into a large wall or your Razor Leaf into a large wall in order for your opponent to deal with it. Cards that can draw you into other cards are also worth mentioning and keeping in your opening hand, as deck can run out of fuel pretty quickly, or you need to access one of your minions or silences within the deck. With that being said, let's get into the games. Alright, let's get into game 1 against Warrior. This opening hand looks horrible against Warrior. The only card that we'll probably keep here is Insight. And this even looks even worse. The good news is we have a bunch of silences, but we have no silence targets, and we even have our pseudo-silence, which is the Stockade Guard. Alright, so we can either use our hero power or just use an Insight or pass the turn. Playing the Loot Hoarder in order to have a draw card on the field. So they're not questline, which is kind of a shock, but at the same time, I'm actually kind of happy about that. It's been a while since I ran into something like Control Warrior. This really demonstrates the issues with this deck. Sometimes you just get all the silences, and then sometimes you get none of the silences. Okay, they get a Robe of Protection. But, lucky for us, we're Silence Priests. Here we're just gonna coin out the Lady Prestor. Sure, we could have silenced the robes, but getting the Prestor out with how many silences we have in our hand is going to be hilarious. And who knows, we can even steal their robes next turn if we want to. Getting a Ysera, which is actually really nice. I just need to make some room for it, to be honest. Ysera is actually probably one of the best dragons to actually get off of Lady Prestor, especially in this deck. The Nightmare, where you get the 4/4 stats, is great to put on a silenced minion, since it already has a huge stat line. Oh, perfect. We get to steal that with the Faceless one. Or the Nameless one, I mean. It's a shame that it turns it into a 3/6 though. But we do have Condemn, so we can still get rid of it. We're actually in a pretty good position here, though the Crush is kinda scary. Though we do have ways to actually silence it or just get rid of it completely this turn. Gonna play a Ysera. Sure, we're gonna mill one card here. That's perfectly fine. We have the two most important ones, which is the Nightmare and the Board Clear. To be honest, the only bad card to mill in this position is the Focused Will, which we actually do. Gonna play a Showstopper and then give it Taunt, then use Raise Dead, and get another Silence, which is nice. Just going to heal up a little bit more. Now, I might have wanted to actually give the taunt to Razor Leaf instead. Because I am losing out on some stats by not doing that. However, this should still in theory be better, as it'll also lower the stats of his minions. And still give us the Razor Leaf when it can actually attack. Going to play the Brightwing. And then we get a Star Student, which is actually really funny. We're going to get rid of the Lord Barrow, since it's the biggest threat for our board, actually. I'm actually so glad this is Control Warrior. It's been so long since I've actually seen the deck. Maybe we can see some control strategies come back now that Westline Warlock has been nerfed as much as it has. Though there are enough anti-fatigue decks that still exist that might stop that from being a thing. Going to bounce back the taunt. Sure, we can't kill them this turn, but we can definitely do enough damage to poke away at their HP. Play the second Raised Dead and get Ysera again. And this time it's a fully buffed up one. Just going to swarm the board a little bit with a bunch of minions. Trying to minimize the amount of cards that I mill away from Ysera. It's interesting they didn't actually play the taunt again. Maybe they're just trying to get rid of as many minions as they possibly can. So I'm going to play the Ysera here, and if I did my math right, we should be able to win with the 2 Nightmares. And we do! Alright, time for game 2 against Paladin. And we're just going to mulligan everything away. That was a horrible start. 2 Focus Will is actually pretty good though. Really wish we had some type of silence target though. Since this could get real tricky real quick if it's hand buff. This doesn't tell us anything though. I was actually looking at hand buff lists in order to make a video on it. However, I found something interesting. The deck runs mana discount for holy spells, but only really runs 2 holy spells within the entire deck, which are your draw power cards. Which I guess makes sense in the long run, but it seems to be just a waste in my opinion. But then again, if you can search your entire deck with having enough draw power, I guess it makes sense. It also allows you to run a lot more big minions if you really feel like it. The watch post is actually putting in some work here. The funny thing is, we can actually use the watch post in this game, or could have used it as a silence target, but usually you never want to do that. Lady Prestor, that's great. Okay, we get a Razor Leaf. And we could have either gave it taunt or just silenced it there. But this will make it more likely where they won't actually attack into it. See, this deck definitely makes you play games with your opponent. However, if they see you running a card like Razor Leaf or Package Runner, they know that you're playing some type of silence priest. We're just going to steal their taunt and then give our minion silence. I kind of wish that didn't actually trigger the weapon, but then whatever. Overlord would have been a better card to actually steal. But we didn't necessarily know they were going to have that in their hand. We can give one of the showstoppers silence here, or we can play the Lady Prestor. I think this game is going to be decided when we use a showstopper and when we don't use one. Because if we time it real well, we can actually debuff a lot of their cards on their field. They can't do anything about it, since what other deck runs any type of silence besides this? Yeah, most definitely. We're going to have to use the silence next turn. And then just go face. And heal ourselves with our hero power. See, the combination with Showstopper and the taunt giving minion actually is really hilarious to pull off. In a matchup like this, it usually just means you win the game unless they have some way to buff up all their minions again for a lot. I also want to do some type of deck with Robes of Protection. It's definitely a card that I could see have a lot of interesting interaction in the current metagame. I'm going to play the Proto Drake first so we can actually still play the other minion.
Well played.
And we're going to clear out some of the board just in case. Sure, we could have tried to rush them, but would have lost us the game. And here they just give up. Alright, now that we're through the games, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. Overall, I would say this deck performed relatively poorly, which is quite depressing because it is one of those decks that keeps getting support every 2 or 3 sets. However, it never gets enough support at the same given time to actually ever be a functional deck. However, the deck was incredibly fun to actually playtest, and that's why I kept testing it out even after countless games where it went poorly. It definitely allows you to use some cards that you normally wouldn't, such as Razor Leaf or the package runners. This is probably the best home besides Evolve Shaman for Lady Prestor, as it allows you to abuse the fact that you're getting a bunch of large dragons for cheap, and with the silence cards in the deck you can easily turn those small dragons into huge dragons, which is really hilarious for your opponent to try to deal with. However, with that being said, let's talk about the major issue with the deck. Because you're relying on cards to silence your minions, you're always relying on a 2-card combo in order to get a big minion out, which is great in theory. However, there aren't many silence cards in the current standard format. For Priest alone, there are a total of 4, one of which is a legendary, and another which doesn't actually affect your minions. And then for neutral cards, you also have only 3, 2 of which are actually extremely playable, and then the third, there's just not enough room, and you want to kind of minimize the amount of minion silences that you actually have, as spell silences are much better when you have a card like Lady Prestor in the deck. I would say overall the deck is probably missing 1 or 2 good silences in order to be actually kind of relevant. It does have enough minions to make the silences impactful. It just needs some type of spell. I wish Shard of the Naru would silence your own minions. However, I could see how that could get out of control real quick, but I don't think it would do enough to push this deck over the top. It would be quite hard for this deck to ever be pushed over the top, to be honest. Unless you gave some type of card like the Warlock questline, where it so heavily pushed Fatigue Warlock that we actually saw a deck that had been meme status for literally years go from meme status to one of the most hated decks in Hearthstone history. And I don't even know what type of card you'd have to print in order for that to be a thing. Maybe something that does X thing after you use X amount of, or a stacking effect that does X thing for each silence that you use during the game, which could be an interesting way to support an archetype that hasn't really been popularly supported since the beginning of the game. For cards that kind of felt awkward in the deck, I would say the worst silence in the deck is actually Showstopper, as most of the time, sure, you could throw a taunt on this and then it would silence all your minions. However, just because of its cost, it was a delayed silence, and sometimes your opponent would just be able to play some type of board clear to get rid of this and your silence targets that you put on the board. Another card that I included in this deck that's kind of awkward is the Condemns. It was included so you could deal with the aggro matchups. However, honestly, this is probably worse than Holy Nova in the deck. I just wanted something cheap in order to clear out the boards quickly if I really needed to. The same can actually be said about Shadow Word Ruin. This was included because I kept running into buff paladins, which would have a bunch of big minions, and I wanted an easy way to deal with it, and this was my solution. The deck honestly needed some more draw power, which is why Librarian is such a good silence in the deck, as that allows you to cycle through your deck looking for your silence targets or even another silence itself. However, there were a lot of games where you would either have one or the other, which is a major problem in the deck. The card that was honestly probably the MVP out of all the cards, and I did not expect it to be, was the Nameless one. This is really one of those cards that got printed and no one cared anything about it. It both allows you to steal your opponent's big threat if they have some type of onboard minion, such as the Overlord that buffs up your minions in your hand, or it allows you to gain basically 2 copies of Package Runner or Librarian, thus allowing you to push a lot further in the game. Overall, if you're looking for a really fun and interesting, unique priest deck to play, and you kind of like the ideas behind Shadow Priest, but didn't like how you were limited in which spells you could include, this might be the deck for you, as if you can catch your opponent off guard, you can actually win quite a few games with it. However, I don't think it's competitive in the least, at least for right now. Hopefully it'll get some type of support in the next set. But with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Until next time, bye bye.